afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first PLC of 2021. We are so excited to be starting the new year with you. I'm Janice Eldridge, Director of Barr Schools, if we haven't had the opportunity to meet before. And I'm so thankful that you gave up a little bit of your time to spend with us today. Just a few logistics before we get started and I introduce our really special guest. If you need continuing education hours, which some of you mentioned to your coaches that you do, we would be glad to provide those for you. We're just going to have you send an email to Christina Ritter. She's going to throw her email in the chat. She also emails your Barr coordinator every Friday, so you can easily get her email address from them, and we'll be glad to send you a certificate for those hours. We are going to keep you muted during the beginning of the presentation. There will be a time for some Q&A at the end. We just want to make sure we don't get any background noise. And if you don't mind, please change your Zoom name. If you can see mine here, I just have my first name, last name. If you can change your Zoom name to mirror that, just so that when we get to the Q&A, it's easy for us to recognize and call on people since we have lots of visitors with us today. So with that, I would love to introduce you to our guest speaker. Our guest speaker has been sharing the importance of promise with people around the world. Alex Sheen is the founder of Because I Said I Would, a social movement and nonprofit dedicated to the betterment of humanity through promises made and kept. He is someone who truly honors commitment. Alex once walked over 240 miles across the entire state of Ohio in 10 days to fulfill a promise. Alex has impacted millions of people with the Because I Said I Would message through the viral nature of social media. His work has been featured on ABC World News with Diane Sawyer, CNN, the Los Angeles Times, The Today Show, and many other programs. Please help me welcome Alex Sheen.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Janice, thank you so much for that introduction, but I got to get something off my chest right away, right off the rip. I am in fact, I am wearing pants. Yes, I put on pants for this. I even put shoes on for some reason. That doesn't make an entire amount of sense, but nonetheless, it's how serious I'm taking this moment. Welcome to not only this session, but 2021. We'll see how this year we're thinking about how the year is going to go, where this is going to take us, and thinking a lot about the future. People are hopefully still holding on to their New Year's resolutions. I know 3 weeks is a lot to ask, but all of that centers around this thought of the future and really the concept of a promise, a New Year's resolution, right? Think about that definition for a second. Merriam-Webster dictionary: a statement telling someone you will definitely do something or something will certainly happen in the future, right? That's the definition for a promise. And the thought of the future is an interesting concept, at least in this way. Human beings are one of the only organisms on this planet that can think of the future to the capacity that we can, right? And with that, if you take a human being, right, put them into an MRI machine, you start to ask them questions about the future, then what you'll notice is that the frontal lobe of the brain actually, it lights up, right? We don't know exactly what's going on in there, but we know that much. That's what's responsible for this concept of future planning, thinking ahead. And oh, what a burden this ability, this skill, this capacity we have is, right? Because even as we are little kids, we think to ourselves, well, I got to do well in school because obviously I got to get good grades and go to a good college because apparently I have to get a mortgage or pay for some bills, and who's going to be with me if I don't have a job? So I got to graduate, I got to get that job. And even since we're just a little kid, we imagine those dominoes falling over. We constantly think about the future We have anxiety about it. We worry constantly about it. But then when somebody looks us in the eye and says to us, hey, listen, I can tell you the future. I promise you this will happen. I promise you, you just watch. It almost calms us biologically. Something maybe coded inside of us some way, somehow. And that's really how I felt in so many instances, even in my own life with my father. My dad was that guy where a handshake, it meant something. If he said he was going to be somewhere, he showed up. It was simple as that. And I had kind of the angry immigrant Asian father. I had that version of a dad. And sometimes I didn't understand why he got so upset. Right? Like, it's just like, calm down, relax a little bit. But I think part of it was because he would follow through on his word. If he said he was going to do it, it was done. And he could not understand why myself, why my brother, why my mom, we just couldn't honor our word. And so I have a question for you right now in the live chat. And it's not about your favorite dip, right? No more Wendy's creamy sriracha. Okay, this is the question I have for you right now. Who's the most reliable person in your life? Right? That was my father for me. But who is that for you? Who on that emergency contact form, you write the same name maybe every single time? Carrie says her dad as well. Dick says his wife. Jack says his spouse. And so you can understand how much a person like that means to us and what life would be like without that. In honor of my father and the promises that he made to me, to my brother, I introduced a concept called the promise card. It's just a simple piece of paper. What you do is you write a promise on the card and you give it to the person you're making that commitment to. You tell them, I'm going to fulfill this promise, and when I do, I earn this card back. It is my property, and I'm coming back for it. You go, you fulfill your promise, you come back to that person, you earn your card back, and you keep it as a reminder that perhaps you are a person of your word. You know, maybe someone like my old man was to me and my brother. I offered to send 10 promise cards to anybody, anywhere in the world at no cost to anyone. And since September 4th of 2012, because I said I would, and our nonprofit organization has distributed over 9.81 million promise cards to over 153 countries around the world and by request only. As those cards would spread around the world and people would write their promises, lessons would unearth themselves on what it takes to keep a promise. And at our organization, we've developed kind of a simple model, a concept that we call the life of a promise. 5 stages that a promise goes through from beginning to end that helps you kind of spot the problems that can come along the way. Just like a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, everything in life has its stages. And I'd love to share some perspective and thought that have come from those millions of promise cards as it relates to maybe commitments in your own life. The first stage is called catalyst, right? Where did this promise come from? Not at the moment when it was made, but just the conditions around it. And I know you folks, you work with schools, right? So why don't we give an example of a promise that has a catalyst that came from there? This 5th grader from California writes, I will never get in jail, right? I don't know if the grammar there is entirely right, but I like it. I hope everybody on this call can maybe keep that promise if it's not too much to ask. Or maybe a promise like this one, I will do all my homework, right? That's good. I like that. But my next question for you, though, or maybe we can wonder this together, is who told you to write that promise? You know? Was that just like something written on a board and the kids just like saying like, listen, lady, I'm just trying to get through my day, right? And just writes down, I'll do all my homework and shows it? Or is it the fact that maybe the kid who promised that he'll never go to jail, does he have a family member who's currently incarcerated? Why is he thinking of that at all? You see, the environment around a promise can tell us a lot about what its life is going to be. And there are so many dimensions to what that means, not only just the pressure almost of a boss, a teacher, or anybody telling you, oh, you should do this. Okay, well, I'll do it. But the context is deeper, because I would see promise cards along the way that would beg me to ask some questions and wonder. I remember this promise card, right? The scribbling isn't entirely clear, so don't worry, I'll read it for you. It says, I will keep my family safe, right? A 6-year-old child draws little stick figures of her family, and it's cute, right? But the thing you need to know about this picture is that I actually took it. I took this picture in a center, a school that is exclusively for children who have been abused, beaten, neglected in the state of North Carolina. And you start to wonder to yourself, well, why would a child write something like that? The context of a promise, a commitment, the challenges we face is important in understanding not only people, but I also think it's also important in not being so frustrated in life. But what do I mean by that? As you have lived to this very moment, you may have been beaten down by broken promises one after the other. And I think that starts to get to you, especially if you're someone like me wearing the same shirt every day or whatever. And it bothers you to see a world that isn't so honest. It bothers you to see a world that may not care. But I often wonder to myself when I see broken promises in the lives of children, in the inmates that our charity works with, across the spectrum, even in my own family, let's say. I ask myself the question, well, were they ever actually taught how to keep a promise? Was that behavior modeled around them? I mean, it took me until I was like 30 years old to understand the 4 types of self-control, different types of negative thinking, like catastrophizing and all or nothing. There are a lot of different things that would have helped me honor my word for the first part of my entire existence that I was never taught in school. And so sometimes, to quell my frustration, to calm myself when a promise is broken, I try to remember that context. Yes, broken promises, they're not fair, but we don't also need to waste our life in anger. Broken promises are going to happen. Not everyone was taught the resiliency skills to get there in the context and the catalyst of their life and the conditions their promise was born in. And so, yeah, people are going to break their promises, but also, I don't know, water is wet, this is just part of life. And we have to remember that at the catalyst phase in a promise. So I have a question for you right now in the live chat right now. I don't know why I say live chat, by the way. Of course it's live. That's what a chat, it seems a little bit redundant. Anyways, I'm going to keep referring to it as if I'm a 90-year-old man. Go into live chat and, what character value do you think schools should teach? If there was a bunch of buttons in front of you and you could press any one of those buttons and it would make every single kid under the age of 18 10% better at any skill, I don't care what it is, what button do you press? You say that would change the dial for the world. Integrity, empathy, compassion, leadership, confidence, values at all, forgiveness. I like that one. Self-belief, right? Kristen, that's a great answer. Sometimes limiting beliefs get in the way of progress in this world and for the families that maybe you even work with through those kids. So in this thought of a catalyst, remember that environment. Remember the psychological conditions that compelled that person to make the promise, not only the forces that were on them at that time, but also the skills, the context, the role models in that person's life that either set them up for success or made it even more challenging. Okay, so that's the first thought of catalyst. Now that's just the environment, right? We haven't even thought of the promise technically. We haven't communicated. We haven't done much of anything. So let's move on to the next phase, which is contemplation. It reminds me of a story of a woman. When I think of contemplation and promises, her name is Amber, pictured here. Now, Amber lives in Texas, and as she was scrolling through Facebook one day, she sees a post from the karate school her daughter goes to, right? And, she's leafing through things like anybody would, doom scrolling, and she comes across this post, and it's about one of the families that actually attend the school. A gentleman had developed a disease affecting his kidney, and the karate school, just kind of doing their little part, was saying, hey, if you think you could be a match, if you'd be willing to swab, sign up, go through the tests to see if you could be a donor, this man will die without it. And so she's saying, well, seems harmless enough, right? I just take a blood test or something, kid goes to karate school. I got to do something with my life, Amber says to herself. So she signs up. And weeks and months actually pass, a weird amount of time almost. And then she gets a call one day. She gets a call from the hospital saying, you are it. Matching an organ to another human being is not just blood or something. There's a multiple factors here, Amber, they say to her, and you're the match. But Amber's like, whoa, maybe can I call you back? She says. And she kind of stares at the ground. She thinks of her family. She thinks about, the operation, literally what happens to my kidney if this actually goes through. And she decides to step away. She said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to withdraw. There'll be somebody else along. I apologize for wasting your time. So time progresses. Amber thinks not much of anything of it until one day she's scrolling yet again. And instead of on that karate Facebook page, she sees it on the local news. The same man, except he's thin and jaundice. He is clearly dying. And Amber can not help but think about really just a feeling of guilt. When she signed those forms that she was going to follow through, that she made this promise, she called her family members who in the first go around weren't that supportive. They're like, well, somebody else will come along. What about your kids and all these things? She told her mother, listen, it could be great if you could help watch your granddaughter, my daughter, as I'm doing this. But if you don't, I'm going to find a way anyway. If I lose my job, then I don't need it anymore. I promised this man and his family that I was going to be there. And that's now what I have to do. So she goes back to them and says, I'm ready. And I got a shirt to wear on that day, she says to herself. She goes into the hospital. On the left side of her body, they actually write the word yes, so they don't cut out the wrong kidney. I guess we're still at a place where we need to do those things. And she's an organ donor, not only just in the practice of what she has done for this stranger, by the way, she didn't even know, but she advocates for organ donation to this day. You see, Amber's case might seem pretty clear cut to you. Of course, you should think through a promise like that and not jump the gun and give a family such hope without contemplation. But think about our own lives when somebody asks you for a promise. Oh yeah, on Thursday, can you help? It's just gonna be short. Don't worry, just right around the block. And you say, yeah, sure, whatever. Thursday, 1 p.m. That sounds great. Yeah, I'll see you then. And then you think to yourself, wait a second, am I available on Thursday? And then you spot a conflict on your calendar, and now you're trying to work through the physics of being in two places at one time. You see, one sure way to break a promise is to go out of the order of operations in the life of a promise, to communicate, yeah, I'll do it, and then think about it. I know this may seem juvenile or just straightforward and easy, but I cannot stress to you enough how often promises are broken just because of this simple order of operation challenge. We need to think through our promise and communicate it. And sometimes if it's not possible, we have to have the courage of no, right? To look someone in the eye and say, listen, I can't do this. And now there's a number of ways that we could add color to the concept of the courage of no. But the best way to explain it, at least for me, is to go back to 1951. In 1951, 7 people are placed in a room. They're told that they're going to participate in a vision test. That's all it is. All they have to do is say which one of the comparison lines is most like the target line. Now, these lines aren't even that close in this study that tells us about the courage of no, right? So what does somebody say? They all say, yeah, it's A. Okay, just get the thing started. And so the researcher does. They say, here's comparison 1, go. Every single person gets the answer right. Okay, comparison 2, let's show that. What happens there? Same exact thing. This is almost getting boring, right? But then something happens in comparison 3. First person gets the answer wrong. Like, it's clearly not C. All right, if that's not strange enough, then the next person also gets the answer wrong, and every single person after that? I mean, how could that possibly be? Well, to answer that question, we will have to pull the veil off this charade. For this is not a test about vision at all. No. This is a test about conformity. Because those first 6 people, they are actors, paid to say the wrong answers. Researchers want to understand, could you get somebody at the end of that line to give an objectively wrong answer just by the pressure and precedent of the people before them? Now, when you do a vision test just like this, without any actors, like a real vision test, right, an honest one, you only get 2% wrong answers. You introduce those actors, though, and that pressure to conform creates 30 times the number of wrong answers. So why am I bringing this up in that contemplation phase as we're thinking about a promise? Well, it turns out we just really have a big problem with this word. We just blurt it out. Anytime someone asks us for a commitment, we almost feel embarrassed to say no. But if I've learned anything from those millions of promise cards, some of the people who are best at honoring their commitments, they are very good at looking at you in the eye and just being honest with you. And then there's an old quote about honesty. Everybody appreciates honesty until you're honest with them, right? And that's maybe some reasons why we don't like saying no. So let me ask you this question in the form of a poll question. Who is it hard to say no to in your life? In this contemplation phase, before you communicate, you're thinking it through, you run into a wall, you shouldn't. Who is it hard, though, to say no to? Let's throw that poll question up here and get your answers. What are you thinking? Go ahead and click that button. Is it friends? Is it parents or work or charity? It could be acquaintances. Sometimes we don't like to disappoint a stranger or when we're making that first impression. So we've got answers coming in, and we're going to close this poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's end that poll and show those results. All right. Work, duh, right? They're almost making you make promises and paying you to do that. But where does work-life balance come in? And again, are we making promises to work that we may not be able to keep? So we're trying to lead with this people-pleasing attitude, which is great. But if we end up not even keeping those promises, then we're not doing favors to anyone. Sometimes that's where honesty comes in, and kids coming in at number 2. We want to be that reliable person in the lives of our children and the children that we work with. And sometimes we stretch ourselves, but what they really need is sometimes the modeled behavior of someone who respects them enough, even as a kid, to say, I can't do that. And when they do make the promise, to actually follow through. So we're going to close that poll, and I'm going to give you just a quick habit, a quick tactic. And that's going to look like this. Memorize a go-to sentence, okay? Sometimes we find ourselves flustered in that moment when we're pressured into a promise, when we're contemplating, and we maybe even need some time to think. Memorize a go-to sentence. Maybe it sounds something like this. Listen, Cassie, I respect you too much to make a promise I can't keep. I'm gonna have to pass. Memorizing it, I mean that like rote memory, like you have to memorize it, because if you have to search for those words, what you're going to lean towards is just saying yes and breaking that promise. So memorization is huge there. And let's talk about the other side here of how you can help people contemplate before they make their promise. It's not always about us. It's about those we're leading and trying to get an honest answer out of them. Give them permission to think, right? Remember that rushed people break promises, that they're going to react with that statement that affirms what you want, but may not just be true. So tell them, hey, listen, take some time to think about it. And then on your calendar, schedule a time to follow up with that person. Listen, open the door for the person to escape, right? Better you be disappointed now than in weeks from now when you were counting on them to show up. Right? So it's not just about you, it's about opening the door for that other person, giving them permission to think in this phase of contemplation that really is about, all that planning and thought process that goes into to a commitment before it's actually even made. All right. So now we understand that the promise has some environmental conditions. We're kind of thinking things through, and here's where rubber meets the road. We're actually going to make that promise, verbalize it, write it down, whatever that might be. Which brings me to the number 15,942. Okay, 15,942 is the number of words the average American speaks in a given day. Now, this was a study conducted by the University of Arizona at Tucson. It was conducted on college students. They actually wore a little electronic device around their neck, and they transcribed all the words. You could throw in a sexist joke here where it's like women spoke more than men. You would maybe expect that, but that's actually not true. The variance between genders is almost statistically negligible. But that's not the point why I bring this up. The point of me bringing this up is that with 15,942 words a single day, how could you possibly remember everything it is that you said, right? It is literally beyond the hardware capacity of our brain to memorize all the statements, because promises that we make, they're not always this on mountain high moment when we're making a commitment and say, I promise to you. No. Remember that dictionary definition. It's just a statement about the future that you are guaranteeing will happen. That could be something like, I will. Yeah, I'll do that. Or of course, I'm going to, always, never, tomorrow. Even the word yes itself is of course a promise. So we have to be careful with the mediums in which we're sharing our promises, because we forget a lot of well-intending thought. But we also have to be careful with our word choice in that selection process. I think because we want to appeal, support, and help those around us, we end up using a lot of flowery language. And I see this on promise cards all the time, right? Now, this means well. Right? This supporter writes, help Francine any way she needs me to. Now, Francine might be going through a very difficult time in her life. We don't know that catalyst and context right now behind this promise, but when I read that literally, okay, are you meaning that you would be willing to lose your job then? Right? Like, is that what you mean? Because maybe Francine's going through a really hard time right now, and you said anyway. Or even a promise like this: I promise I will do what I can for who I can when I can. Okay, listen, that's like literally, that is so wide. It's there's no tangibility to it, and is bound to be broken because of its scope. I think because we see so many promises in the books we read, in the movies that we watch, that we want to appeal to people with that same sort of strength and language. But again, I think it's setting us up for some challenges. So a habit and tactic that I recommend is to avoid those absolutes. Do you actually mean what you're saying? You don't in your whole life have to say everything that you mean, meaning there are times where you joke around. Everything doesn't have to be literal. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying when you get to the point of a commitment, especially maybe to one of the children you work with, do you literally mean what you say? Words like always, forever, anything, anytime, everything, no matter what, never. Sometimes these words should be avoided, and we should scope them down to a real, legitimate promise that has a couple more guardrails and not this movie-like cinematic language. So in the life of a promise, in the communication phase, it's the meaning of words used in a promise to all parties involved and the medium in which it's communicated. I recommend obviously writing promises down, putting them in the calendar so you don't forget them. A lot of different dimensions in communication that we can't get to entirely, but you can understand this is obviously very important in how that promise is going to go. All right, now we get to the thought of the carryout phase. These are all of the best practices that you're going to use, self-regulation and tactics, all this stuff bundled together to actually complete the promise, right? And we're in that point now. And when we think about carryout phase, I want to talk about a specific story. Start my explanation with a story about Janine Campbell, who in this story is 50 years old. Now, Janine Campbell, at age 50, had suffered a stroke, which for those of you who may not know, a stroke is when blood doesn't get to your brain and it causes dysfunction and challenges, of course, a very serious medical issue in many cases. Janine Campbell experiences this stroke, is taken care of by a healthcare facility, and then is sent home. On a particular day, Janine is just, getting ready for her day. She steps into the shower. She turns on the shower. She's been there for, a couple minutes, she thinks. And then she hears a knock on the door. Hey, Janine. Janine, you got to get out of there. And she thinks, so what? It's her husband, it's Janine's husband, knocking on the door. Janine, what have you been doing? You got to get out of there. And she said, what do you mean? Is something wrong? What's going on out there? I just been in here for like a couple minutes. I just got started. And he goes, Janine, you've been in there for like 2 hours. You need to get out of the shower. What's going on? You see, what has happened in this scenario with Janine Campbell is that she had developed a disorder, a challenge, a condition called dyschronometria. Dyschronometria, obviously a long word that most people have never heard. What it comes down to, this is a time perception disorder that in our five senses, there may be a sixth of sorts. Our ability to measure, perceive, estimate time that we have passed through, and maybe even time that is ahead of us on how long something may take. Now, time perception is very interesting to the carryout phase as we're trying to keep a promise, because there are so many tasks and things that we have to check off the list to fulfill our promise, and all of that is bounded by the constraints, limitations, and challenges of time. So if we were to understand and acknowledge the fact that dyschronometria exists in many people with conditions like stroke, could we say to ourselves, well, then maybe time perception is on some sort of scale, right? On one side, dyschronometria, an extreme deficit in the ability to sense time, to perceive it, to predict it, to estimate it. And then on the other side, maybe there is somebody who has just an extreme ability, right? Just like somebody who's exceptional at basketball or baseball, just kind of born with certain capacity. Maybe there's somebody on the other side who has perfect time perception, can not only tell you how much time has passed, but how long it'll take to do something just based on that thermometer inside of them. So with that context, if we could say this is not a perfect science, but if there is some sort of scale, let me ask the question to you in a poll question right now. How good do you think you are at estimating time? right? Is it accurate, very accurate, average, inaccurate? Think about that scale. Think about that bar I just showed. Let's throw that poll question up here and let's see what people are thinking. You know, I could say for myself as these answers roll in, I was terrible at this. You know, I figured out that takes 30 minutes, I don't know, and things take 2 hours. And it's not necessarily something that awareness can always adjust for, because I would keep on being late for things over and over and over again, which I'll get to in a second. So let's go ahead and close this poll and share the results, see what people say. I love statistics because the average amount of people said average, right? And that works for me, right? Some people think they have a very inaccurate time perception. Some people think, man, I'm on the ball. I can compare myself to other people in my life, and I think I'm there. So we'll close that poll and continue with this thought of time perception and carry it into the belief, maybe shifting an angle for you just a little bit to say that our vision is a little bit blurry of time, right? Some people are good at it, some people are bad at it. And what I want to say right now is that awareness kind of doesn't matter. You can say to yourself that I just meant I'm self-aware, right? Alex, I just told you I'm very inaccurate with my time perception. And that may not actually make it any better. Let me give it a comparison. Let's take the glasses that I'm physically wearing right now. You could tell me every single day of my life, Alex, your vision isn't good. Alex, you cannot see without glasses. You could tell me all day and I could say, oh, I'll work on that. And that doesn't make any sense, because it is a biological limitation that I have. I need a physical tool to give me better vision into the distance. That's the only way it's going to really happen, right? The same thing is true, I think, for our time vision and that time perception. And for me, that tool is the calendar. Calendaring out all the steps that are ahead of me, because some people intuitively snap to it. Yeah, I got all these things, and that's probably going to be, that day's kind of busy. They're just kind of got these thoughts floating out there, and somehow, some way, they have a sense that pieces them together and they work it out. I do not have this skill. I must put it into a tool, and I have to work out the equation to estimate, to have a better vision into it. And that's why I recommend a practice called 100% calendaring. This is actually some of my calendar from even today. But 100% calendaring is a tactic where you calendar everything: sleep, time to get ready, eat, everything, right? And if I were to say that, you'd be like, oof, Alex, that looks stressful. Like, I don't, that's for you kind of thing, type A guy. But actually, studies show that this could actually reduce stress, not increase it. When you look at a study published by the American Psychological Association, the best way to manage stress was time management. It actually proved to be better than setting goals, better than creating lists. Time management created better job satisfaction, increased GPAs, and increased overall satisfaction with life. Because when you calendar things out, you have a plan. When you have a plan, you got a little hope. You can see the feasibility, and that stress comes down. I experienced this in everyday life as the leader or founder, or whatever you want to call me, of Because I Said I Would. Prior to the pandemic, I would travel 300 days a year, 135 speeches, 115 city visits. I was run ragged. And when I would do that, a thought of a follow-up item that I owed someone would come into my mind. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to email that school. I was supposed to send them that lesson plan or whatever. And I would take that task and I would put it on my calendar. And the next time I would think about that, and I would start to worry and spool about this thing. Oh yeah. I'd be like, no. I don't need to worry about that. I have literally scheduled a time to stress about that. I need to live in this moment, because in that habit that I'm talking about, I'm taking that stress and I'm giving it a place to die. It's a reserved time to worry about it so I can live in this moment. I cannot tell you how much I believe that time management it is stress management. There are a lot of targets on my back because of the nature of the promises that I make, ludicrous things I say I'll do, like walk across the entire state of Ohio in 10 days. I've done things like that. And I could not get through it if it wasn't for a calendaring. So here's another poll question for you right now. Let's throw this one up there. What often gets pushed off your calendar? Let's wonder, is it exercise, proper eating, sleep, family time, hobbies, volunteering? We're at a time of New Year's resolutions, right? We're thinking about these things still a little bit. Let's go ahead and punch in your answer. We're going to close this poll in 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's share those results and see. Of course, Pew Research's #1 surveyed New Year's resolution for basically since time began, when dinosaurs were roaming the earth, exercise. Everybody has that. And I want to take a specific second to say how important your physical capacity is in keeping promises. That energy level that exercise, proper eating, and sleeping gets you, it makes it easier to keep the promise. And I'm literally saying things like physically getting off the couch. When you're in better shape, when you eat better, it's not as much of a task. And that is why it's so important to being a person of your word. I know that sounds a little disconnected, right? The character value of being a person of your word and exercise and that physiology. But I believe there is some connection there because your energy level is a little higher. It's a little easier to keep, and there is some sense to be had there. But all of these things are important. That's why calendaring is important. We're going to close this poll, and I'm going to put you to a 3-day challenge. I know this is a little extreme, and I'm kind of that way, but give me just 3 days then. Don't do it forever. Give me 3 days and calendar 100%. I'm talking about sleeping, eating, time to get ready, your tasks, every single thing, 100% calendar what no one else would, and see if it enables you to spot challenges before they happen, reduce your stress, and make promises that you actually can keep. We have been talking about the carry out phase, the actions, the planning, the resources, and circumstances involved in fulfilling a promise after we have made that promise. There are so many more tactics like checklisting and a bunch of things that I could talk about, but I wanted to share a couple of thoughts in the carry out phase that might help you reach your own goals, take maybe care of that exercise promise that you're making to yourself or whatever it might be. Okay, we're almost to the end of the road here in the life of a promise. In phase 5, we have consequences. What happens after that promise is either kept or broken, right? And the rippling consequences of it, I think that for me is exemplified by a story, a supporter of ours in the charity, a young student named Benjamin Awad. Now, Benjamin, pictured here at about 8 years old, lives out near Fresno, California. And at about the time this picture was taken, a couple months before, Ben started to learn about the disease of cancer, right? If COVID wasn't in our lives, cancer would be the second leading cause of death in the United States. But as a young child, as cancer is familiar to you and me, as a young child, Ben is just learning about this, right? His mom has a friend, so a family friend is getting cancer, I guess, and he's trying to understand what does that mean? And in that process, he learns that people, because of the treatment they take, will lose their hair. And to try to feel some sense of normalcy, people will actually grow their hair out and donate it, and that's obviously common knowledge for every single person on this call. But to Ben, this is hitting his life for the first time, because the first thing he thinks about is like, wait a second, like any hair? Are you saying are you saying that I can do that? Like, you're telling me that every single person I know could be doing this and that I could do that? And his mom said, yeah, well, I wouldn't see why not. You could grow your hair out and donate it. And so then he does. And he shaves it all the way down to the skin. because he didn't want to leave any extra. He was like, well, I did this, I might as well go all the way. So why am I talking about this in the consequences phase in the life of a promise? We could say, well, the consequences of him donating the hair and helping the person, that's one thing. But let me take it in a slightly different direction. Because as soon as Ben really started to contemplate this promise, and he sat in that chair to carry it out, all along that way, he realized that as soon as he was done with that haircut, as soon as he stepped into that school, kids were going to make fun of him for it. But because of a promise, Benjamin Awad knows that, listen, there are some things in this life that are worth being made fun of for. That sometimes the promises that we make and keep to help those in need, yeah, they're going to have positive consequences, but it also may come with an amount of sacrifice. Not everything in this life is fair. And that's part of the lesson that Ben learned so early on with the promise card that he wrote. Because I said I would have seen the impact and the consequences of promises, the rippling effects that even fulfilling an education can have in the life. Of course, someone like you sitting in this moment right now at the Bar Center would understand that. And in this pandemic, we have been taking our resources as an organization and trying to apply it to the challenges that we face now and the consequences that are going to come from that. Because I said I would has actually ran one of the largest volunteer face mask sewing operations in the entire state of Ohio, sewing over 20,000 face masks at the peak of shortage for healthcare facilities. And now the rippling effects of that could have saved a life. I hope that is true, but I also want to give one more example in this consequent phase that hopefully resonates with you, a habit and tactic that you can take away in the way that you communicate with people to make sure they understand the consequences of what they're doing, as I would have to do with our volunteer sewers. We want to make sure that people know up front what's at stake, to communicate those consequences as soon as we're engaging with them. Because in April, we were running out of fabric, like we couldn't find it. And if we gave you a set of fabric, like we needed you to sew that and return to us, because we're on a clock here. And I know that's not fair to you as a volunteer, but someone's waiting on this. There's another sewer who could have taken this pack, right? And they could have sewed it and it could have been in the hands of a hospital. So if you take this, please know that we need it back as soon as you can, as you can, versus I could have just handed out that fabric and say, well, get it back to us as soon as you can, I guess. But if I did that, they would be less likely to keep the promise because they didn't know the consequences of it. So communicate up front. Say to the person after they have made the promise to you, say, listen, thank you so much for helping. Just want to know we're running out of fabric. This is all we have left. Hospitals eagerly waiting these masks. You mean so much to us because you're doing this. Thank you. Right? It doesn't have to be punitive. It doesn't have to be like or else kind of language. But if you let them know that stuff up front, what the consequences of this promise are, they're more likely to keep it. And oh, by the way, they probably don't know that. There are many of our volunteers who never return those packs because we forgot to tell them what was happening and where the supply chain was. How would you know that? That's internal to my organization. That's just something that's on me to communicate as the person receiving the promise. So the range of effects are the consequences. Some of them are intended, some of them are unintended, and it's over time. It's not just when the promise is kept. The rippling effects of a promise in a life can go forever. So we've talked about the catalyst phase, the conditions in which a promise is born. And then we get to this point where we start thinking about it in the contemplation phase. We communicate that through writing it down, through saying it. We hopefully choose some right words, but then we've got to actually follow through with this thing. I only really talked about a couple things like calendaring, but so many ways to keep a promise, because ultimately that's going to have some consequence, rippling effect in the lives of other people. and in your own. I really appreciate your time in hearing the thoughts on what it takes to keep a promise. I look forward to actually joining the next event that you guys are going to have, and I'm going to be there in person. I'm just curious, though, my last chat question here is, what city and state are the schools that you're working with? Where are you coming from? And everybody on this call, whether it's Christina, Adriana, Amy, and everybody, we've got some Minnetonka, Minnesota, we've got Mesa, Arizona, and Los Angeles, and Glendale, Arizona. I was going to say my aunt lives in Glendale, California, but I look forward to seeing those who join that event, because your work in schools, it means a great deal to me. I haven't gone into all of our programming. This isn't the point of the speech, but we have programming in schools, teaching character education, social emotional learning, and all that good stuff. And along the way, pre-pandemic, in all the assemblies that I've given and talked to kids, it's amazing to hear what their hopes are for the future. But in some ways, it's also very difficult to hear the challenges that they face. I came from a pretty well-off place on this planet. My dad paid for my college, paid for my first car. He was a pharmacist. He did all right. And it would take, because I said I would, to show me in the visit to all these schools to realize that not everybody has it the same way, You start to learn about that number, free and reduced lunch. After a speech, you talk to the kids, you shake their tiny little hands. They tell you, I'm a foster care child. I'm sleeping in a car with my mom. We're trying to make things work, Kids will look at you in the eye and tell you that they've been abused, but then say, but I got this little card, And so maybe I'll make a promise. There's a quote from Mark Twain that makes me think of all the work that you and I do in schools, that I hope you already know. And if you don't, maybe you just never forget after I share it. It's been that way for me, at least. Mark Twain once said, the two most important days of your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Helping kids on their journey, that's part of my reason. That's part of my why, and I hope that's the same for you. Thank you so much.
Well, Alex, thank you so much. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like Alex was speaking right to me that whole time. Not only amazing content, but wonderful modeling for us on how to engage through a virtual presentation. So Alex, I just really appreciated that and want to thank you on behalf of all of us for really helping us understand the importance of a promise. I think personally for me too, I am thinking about, why am I so much more productive at work than I am, say, on the weekends? And that calendaring thing, I think you have something there. So I'm going to accept your challenge and try to do some 100% calendaring. So we are going to take the last few minutes here for some questions and give you guys some time to ask Alex some questions. So what you can do is you can put your thoughts or your questions in the chat, and Alex will call on you, pick a few to call on you and answer. I just want to start us off by one question here, Alex. So when you do break a promise, how do you get back on track?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Janice, because I think a lot of people knee jerk when they break a promise and they say, well, I got to double down, right? I got to promise this person more. And, that would be the right thing to do, in so many ways. But again, that lacks that contemplation phase a little bit, because maybe there's a real reason you broke the promise. I think about board members for our charity. You know, sometimes they're stretched to the limit. They signed up for too many things, and it's probably best that we just actually not make any more promises, right? And that's okay. You know, sometimes things don't go the way we want them to. You know, like my mom used to say to me, Alex, whoever told you life is fair, they lied to you. I don't know. Like there's some things we got to just kind of come to that moment of truth and honesty. I think honesty and accountability pair well together as values. You know, don't always knee jerk to that, just making a bigger promise. And the second thing I would say is just a what I call a raw apology. What do I mean by that? When's the last time anybody on this call, right? Ashley or Robin or Katrina, anybody is in the chat, anybody who's leading this, when's the last time someone looked you in the face and said, hey, listen, I was supposed to be there. I didn't show up. I'm not here to waste your time. I apologize. And I broke a promise to you. And then stop talking. Like, when's the last time someone did that to you? Do you know how much we respect a person who's willing to do that? You know, we really do. And so the face that we're trying to save when we're saying, oh, it's because of traffic and then weather, and then that face you're trying to save is actually, you're doing worse than just taking it on the chin. Say, listen, I messed up here. People will really appreciate that. Now, you know, there's no magic bullet for every broken promise, so please don't take it that way. But, you know, I do think an authentic and raw apology is just needed more in society at large, with politicians, with our families, with every single person that exists. It's okay to recognize that flaw, as long as you're genuine in, you know, your next steps and honesty from there. So, you know, thank you for that. All right, let's see. What's our next question? I know we had one a little bit higher up here. And I think Robin had this question about tools that we use for calendaring. Let me just approach that one real quick. You know, I use Google Calendar, but the truth is it's really not the piece of paper that you write on it and the thickness and the grain and the size of the paper. It's that you're writing it all, you know, type of thing. And that's true with calendaring tools and apps. I really haven't seen an advantage from one to the other, but that 100% calendaring discipline is really what I would recommend. Even when you've got a big block and you say, Alex, I'm not going to calendar something just to calendar it. Well, then just mark it as free time. Right? Just literally call it free time, mark the whole 3-hour period, and then just live and coast in that moment, knowing you don't really actually have anything to do. But as soon as you then find yourself in that free time and you're like, oh, I got to, and this and this and that, or what about that? Well, then now you can keep calendaring it out. I really think that practice is important. And the next thing that I'll say that isn't really a tool, but I'll just expound on it a little bit more, is cutting up your promises. So maybe you've got a task, a volunteer project, whatever it is. I mean, that's what I would say in my life, but you've got something, you block 4 hours on it. It's going to take 4 hours to do. I don't like to calendar anything for more than an hour, because what I mean by that is I'll just make, okay, the first hour is step 1, these things, second hour is step 2, these. By the time I get to step 3 and then I write step 4, I'm like, actually, there's no way I can do that step 4 in an hour. This is going to take at least 6 hours. If limiting yourself to an hour max on your calendar forces contemplation, because you got to write something in that next cell, right? That next calendar appointment. And then it just gets you to think a little bit deeper. It's nothing, you know, miraculous. But let's bring Robert M. up here. Robert, I would love to hear a little context around a question. I love the question, by the way. I get it sometimes in different angles in different ways. Is it possible to get him to a panelist and then and give you the ability to share your voice and ask that question, Robert?
Robert, you got to turn your camera on for me and then I can bring you up.
And as we're doing that, Robert's question Actually, here he is. Robert, you want to just unmute yourself real quick and give me the question, any context or thoughts behind it.
I was thinking it was pretty obvious that a lot of us were very moved by your message today, including myself. But there's always naysayers. There's always the people that go, nice idea, sounds good on paper, sounds good at a presentation. It got everybody pumped up at a conference or whatever. But yeah, it doesn't, it's not for me. I mean, what do your skeptics say and how do you respond to them?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that question, Robert, because it's a very valid one. Motivational speaking, leadership development, whatever you want to call what it is I'm doing right now, is a very strange industry. And I think people are always looking for this magic bullet, right? I mean, Robert, how many, events, leadership moments, training and development? I mean, you sat through a lot of things like this, as many people have. And so there's some overlap, there's some trends and new and different things. And what I would say to your question about the skeptics and is this actually going to work, is it may not, right? We are complex organisms, right? What motivates, drives, functions for one person doesn't work for everybody. It's almost something akin to a drug in itself. There's a distribution curve to the effectiveness of insulin and Tylenol and every single thing. Does it work for a lot of people? Yeah, that's the middle portion, perhaps. But there's always going to be a lot of people where that medicine, it just doesn't stick. It doesn't work. In fact, they may be allergic to it. It literally may send them in the opposite direction. Maybe it does stress somebody out too much to calendar that much. So I think we should take that eye of being skeptical to something and say, well, it might not be a miracle, but not allow that skepticism to become a limiting belief that prevents us from trying at all, right? What I would say, give it a shot. If you're reading a book like Atomic Habits or When by Daniel Pink or any sort of these books, you just got to give it an authentic try. And if it doesn't work, then yeah, it just doesn't work for you. It may work for somebody else, but your Myers-Briggs type or whatever kind of psychology we want to talk about profile just may not match. So I love that question about being skeptical about really kind of anything. Okay. Let's see this question. Let's get Michelle. It says Michelle Colon, student for the admin side of this. Let's bring her up. We've got a question here, and I would love to take it here, Michelle's context. Let's promote her to that spot. And I got Megan up. And so, hi, Megan, I like the glasses, Megan, by the way. They're very nice. But we are going to try to throw Michelle up here and see if she's around. Okay, there we go.
Hi there.
I would love to take your question, give some context to it. Your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So yes, I appreciate what you said about the yes and all of us overcommitting ourselves to work and, that being our area. And so oftentimes people do break promises at work. And in a professional context, it is disappointing. So I'm wondering if you have any advice on how to coach others through, maybe not, without discouraging them from saying yes, but how do we coach through when people aren't keeping their promises repeatedly?
Yeah, I like
not acknowledging it. Sometimes they don't even acknowledge it or apologize for it. It's just kind of like their new normal, and it's just really not professional or respectful.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Michelle. I'll give a couple of thoughts around it. First, I think it is so much easier right now to make promises and break them because of almost a shift in technology. What do I mean by that? In the year that I was born, 1985, let's flash back to that. And let's say you were an adult in 1985. You tell your best friend, hey, I'm going to meet you at the movie theater. We're going to go to movies, 8:00 showing, right? I'll see you there. 8:01 comes and goes, 8:02 comes and goes, and your friend's not there. And what do you think? My friend is now dead. You start to worry. Why? because you can't call that person. Like there's no cell phone to call. And even if you call them at home, they're not there. They'd be driving here. Did they get in a car accident? Is everything okay? It used to be a lot harder to break promises because you couldn't pick up this phone, send a text 5 minutes before it started and said, hey, dude, I'm not coming. Sorry, something came up. Peace. And I think that speaks to Michelle's point here. People are breaking promises, not acknowledging it, maybe even using technology as a shield so you don't have to disappoint someone to their face. It used to be you had to call the person and hear the tone in their voice, the disappointment, and that was called accountability. And we don't have that as much right now. So I think that's challenging. There is no miracle solution that I could explain in a short amount of time on how to solve this systemic problem in culture. But what I will say is a quote from Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein once said, leading by example is not the primary way of influencing others. It is the only way. And so what I would say to you is as you're leading others or maybe even a group of people, apologize deeply to that person, apologize in front of everybody. When you're late, apologize, say that, make that normal. If you've got people on your team who have a better accountability threshold, meaning they're more likely to be that person who apologizes, who really appreciates the fact that they kind of messed up. Partner with that person and start to build a culture where you guys are doing that, and that modeled behavior that we expect in children, right? We say, okay, we're going to model our behavior, the kids will follow. Well, that's the same thing we got to do with our teams and building that coalition in something as simple as apologies could be an approach. So with that, I really appreciate everyone's questions. And I'm just going to say one more thing because Brad, the comment is too good not to say. Many teens have never had an adult apologize to them. That goes back to that catalyst, right? Like I'm the first person to be frustrated about someone not breaking or somebody breaking a promise and not apologizing. But that may be true. They're like, that's just their existence. And someone's got to show them the way. Hopefully it's someone like you in the life of a young person. So with that, I hope only the best for you in 2021. We put that garbage year behind us and we're moving forward. Let's hope only the best for our friends, our families, and our country itself as we defeat this pandemic. Wear your masks, stay safe, and thank you again.
Alex, thank you so much. That was so wonderful. I am feeling energized. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do from 5 to 6 because I have not calendared it. So it's probably going to go do that right after this. So I see you guys had some questions we didn't get to answer. Awesome for you guys. Alex is speaking at our next conference. So look for details from Carrie and Hannah and Ari and our communications team. Because I bet he would be glad to answer your questions in person. And we will be so thrilled to be able to be back together with you in person at our next conference. So thank you guys all for taking some time to join us. Remember, if you need a certificate, send Christina an email. She'll be glad to give you a certificate for your time. And I hope you all have a wonderful night. Thank you.